Overlord First Half Chapter 1, Prologue Part 1. DMMORPG, Dive Massively Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game, Yggdrasil. In 2126, it was released by a local Japanese producer and is a sensory-based MMO. By using a sensory-based dedicated console, you could link up your 5 senses and play a game in which you feel as if you were in reality. This system was born in 2079. The first aim was the military, and then it was developed for the field of medicine, but the cost was high. It was then simplified after 10 years and now every home has it. Although techniques created by net shops and tourist sites were used to lower the development costs, it still took 15 years before the first DMMORPG was born. One of the reasons why the DMMORPG, Yggdrasil, was better than any other, was because of the amount of data. The choice of characters diverged from the basic humanoid races of humans, elves, and dwarfs. You can also be a goblin or an orc, which both are a part of the demi-human race that boasts better abilities than the humanoid races, although their appearance is unsightly. Lastly, races that possess a variety of monstrous abilities but suffered from penalties in other aspects, the heteromorphic races. In total, there were 420 of such races. In addition, the number of classes, both basic and advanced, can be summed to about 880. Naturally, the basic classes made of half of those. It was that large of a quantity. And if you satisfied the basic conditions, you could have a taste of multiple ones. The classes could only go up to level 15 and the maximum limit was level 100. No matter what race you were, you could choose more than 7 of them and pile it up. If you wanted, you could have 100 classes. However, you'll be weak. Basically, it was such a large amount of data that it was impossible to create 2 identical characters unless it was intentional. It was at a level where you could still make it more elaborate. By using the creator tools sold separately, you could customize the appearance of weapons and armor, your appearance, and the settings of your dwelling. For example, say you have killed a dragon. Money and experience drop as per normal DMMOs. However, this is different. The dropping of money and experience does not change. However, in place of items, crystals containing data are dropped. It was this type of data. Length, +1, weight, 40, physical damage increased by 5%, special effect, additional damage/fire +10, special effect, martial arts, rush +1. Although there are actually more details in the data, you already have the general picture. You could tinker with this data by using the creator tools and make original items. You could also buy appearances within the MMO. By doing this, you could make an unlimited variety of original items. Also, if you were a necromancer, you could turn the corpse of a dragon into an undead monster. Alternatively, if you were a berserking warrior, you could bathe in the corpse's blood and gain a bonus. Classes that could turn dragon bones into golems existed, as well as those that could turn it into medicine. If this was a normal DMMO, the body would disappear immediately after death, so this would provide many advantages to the players. For example, you could make a golem out of dragon bones due to the data. By playing around with this data with the creator tools, you could create your own golem. In addition, you could add your own AI to use for gatekeeping and for transportation. It kickstarted the creator souls of the Japanese, resulting in the following. You could distribute your own data on 2channel or the official homepage. From there emerged people called God's craftsmen. They could do things such as a partnership with the illustrator and make a present of a special appearance. Some used AI to strengthen their creations, others created cat AIs as cute pets. Yggdrasil had changed the way that DMMOs had been up till now, from focusing on battles to explorations. As expected, when comparing a sword made of clear crystal and a sword comprised wholly of iron, the amount of data needed for the exterior is completely different. The amount of data is determined by the resources of the item, such as minerals. So the goal was not only to destroy monsters, but also to search for resources and to explore for new discoveries. Players enjoyed calling themselves adventurers to do such things. Those players seeking unknown knowledge and unseen lands had a large map waiting for them. Asgard, Alfheim, Vanaheim, Nidavellir, Midgard, Jotunheim, Niflheim, Helheim, Muspelheim. There were 9 worlds, each with their own particular traits, each were 2 to 3 times the size of Tokyo. It was common not to meet other players at the frontier for a week. A DMMO that promised unlimited enjoyment. The creators made a famous remark, a DMMO where strength is not everything, which perfectly embodied the game. With such explosive popularity behind it, It had reached a level of acclaim where Yggdrasil and DMMOs were considered as one and the same in Japan. However, that was from a time long past. The Great Underground Tomb of Nezarec. It was a large tomb with 8 floors, an infamous dungeon. Once, there was a union of 6 guilds with players and NPCs totaling up to 1,500 people. It was the first time in the server that such a large group of people aimed to get to the lowest floor. Then, they were all wiped out. It was a place where such a legend was born. However, the level of monsters were not particularly high. According to the rules, at best the monsters were at level 30. The level cap in Yggdrasil was 100, and since a third of the 1,500 people were at that level, they should not have been much of an enemy. On the contrary, they should have been able to tear through them like paper. However, the characteristics of the undead that appear there can heal by negative damage, and get damaged by positive energy. They are also unaffected by instant death attacks and mental attacks as well. It is a strategy that takes advantage of it. The negative damage spread across the floors, by about 1 point, and reduces the area effects on positive energy while still allowing recovery magic. In addition, there was a transportation trap system that could divide a party. That wasn't the only trap, as there were many other types strung up all over the place. Traps that blinded people and ones that poisoned the air, all for the sake of blocking the path of the adventurers. Also, coupled with the typical undead of zombies and skeletons, original monsters could be used and is one of the major factors of the crushing defeat. While having the appearance of a bloated zombie, the plague bomber detonated itself and dealt negative damage and healed nearby undead. The ghost could pass through walls and had a specialization in hit and run tactics to touch you with their weakening touch and deal damage. The screaming banshee had the ability to instantly kill anyone who heard it or deal mental damage. The Deathborn totem had the appearance of tens of skeletons merged together and could attack multiple times. There were tens of other undead races that waited elsewhere, all were capable of sending chills down your spine. Of course, all the enemies were comprised solely of undead, but it still was not easy to cope with them. Elementals, demons, and devils appeared more suddenly frequently than summons. Summon monsters could be specifically chosen to be disadvantageous to the opponent. In a nutshell, you could choose those with fatal special abilities. Naturally, the deeper you go, more difficult monsters would appear. It was a wall of monsters so thick that you could not even imagine how much resources were spent for it. Now, according to what was currently known, the Great Underground Tomb of Nezarec had 8 floors. The intruders merely thought that they just had to get through 8 floors. There were actually 10 floors in total. When you enter the 9th floor onwards, the scenery of the tomb changes. It becomes similar to that of a white castle. Countless chandeliers, that emitted light, hang from the ceiling. Furniture suitable for kings and nobles were placed around. The marble floor was polished and sparkled. For those that were clueless, would they even believe their eyes? Wouldn't it be natural to think that way? This Great Underground Tomb of Nezarec, in the DMMO, Yggdrasil, was the stronghold of the guild standing at its peak, Einzulgon. On the 9th floor of the Great Underground Tomb of Nezarec, the marble passage was without a single speck of dust, and a set of large mahogany doors were opened. In it, a giant round table made of obsidian was placed, and surrounded by 41 gorgeous chairs. However, most of them were empty. The once full seats were now only occupied by 2 people. Sitting in one of the seats was a humanoid figure clad in a jet-black robe fringed with gold and purple. It was not a normal human. It had a close resemblance to a dried-up corpse, with skin covering a little bit of its bones. A dark red light flickered in its empty eye sockets. Another one was a lump of black mass making a doro-doro sound. It made you think of coal tar, and it was constantly moving around. It was impossible for it to hold the same shape for more than a second. The former was an undead that was pursuing magic, an existence that was the strongest amongst the liches, an overlord. The latter was an elder black ooze, an existence that had the strongest acidic abilities amongst the slimes. Their figures occasionally appear in the hardest dungeon, their names infamous among the adventurers. The first of the infamous figures, the Overlord, spoke. Of course, its mouth never moved. "Really, it has been a while, Hiro-san. It really has been a long time. I believe it was since you transferred jobs? It seems so. Actually, even now I'm in the middle of a death match." "Uwa? That's terrible. Are you okay?" "My body? It's in tatters." The elder black ooze prodded its arm, looking very much like a strange dance. "I had no time to rest at all. I'm being whipped like a slave at my job. Uwa. It's really terrible. Their conversation turned to complaining about their jobs. To join Einzulgon, you had to satisfy several conditions. One was that you had to be a functioning member of society. Another was that you had to be of the heteromorphic race. Their conversation went on for a while and stopped. It was a silence caused by them wondering what should happen next. Oh no, sorry for having you listen to all that. What are you saying? I'm very happy that I could meet with everyone after such a long time. Hearing you say that takes a lot off my shoulders. Ma, I really want to stay until the last moment, but I'm too tired. Ah. That's true. Take a good rest, okay? And what will the guildmaster be doing? I will be here until the end. Someone else might come. I see, thanks for everything up to now, Momonga-san. The reason why this game was so fun was all thanks to you. Momonga, as the Overlord, made a large gesture in reply. That is not true at all. It was because everyone was here. I didn't really do anything special. I believe that it's not true, thank you. I will be taking my leave now. Right. Thanks for everything. Just like that, the last of the 6 people to visit the guild disappeared. Momonga gazed at the seat where Hirohiro just was. Making a gesture like he was shaking off something, he slowly rose to his feet. In the direction he was facing, there was a staff. It had the motif of a caduceus, with 7 snakes entwining around it. In each of the snakes' mouths were different colored gems. The grip was made of a clear crystal that sparkled a bluish-white light. Anyone could tell that it was a first-class item. It was a guild weapon of which a guild could only own one, the symbol of Einzulgon. Originally the guildmaster was supposed to own it, but it was decorating this room instead. The reason was because it was none other than the symbol of the guild. It was for the sake of making this weapon that everyone cooperated and spent their days on adventures. The team separated and competed to collect the materials. Everyone argued over the appearance, pushing for their own views and making it one bit at a time. That was the golden age of Einzulgon, a story from that time. While reaching out his hand, he stopped in mid-motion. He stopped at this moment as, the staff that everyone made, this brilliant piece of his memories, he felt that he was about to throw it to the ground. But, he should not leave it here in the end. There were people who came despite their bodies tired from work. There were also those that gave up their family time, causing them to have a fight with their wives. Also, there were those who laughed while saying they took a paid leave. There was a time where they would just talk about it for one whole day. Lots of stupid ideas were made. They planned adventures to collect treasures. They also ambushed an enemy guild's castle and conquered it. There was also once when they brought down the strongest class of boss monsters. While they were defeating monsters, they were also attacked by other players. Now, everyone was gone. Out of the 41, 37 had quit. Momonga could not remember the last time the other 3 had come. It was a guild in ruins, but it had its golden age. It was the crystallization of that sparkling lustrous time. And that was why he did not want to pull it into the current remains of that. However, he was thinking of the opposite. Einzulgon respected the use of majority vote. He, as the guildmaster, merely did the clerical work of communicating with everyone. And that was probably the reason. He wanted to try out the power wielded by the guildmaster for the first time. Hesitating, he reached out with his hand, and took the staff of Einzulgon. The moment his hand touched the staff, it released a wavering blackish-red aura. Sometimes, an anguished expression of a human appeared and crumbled a moment later. We really added too many details into this thing. The supreme staff that he had never held even once after its completion finally fell into the hands of its intended owner. While feeling the drastic increase in his status, he felt lonely. Shall we make a move, symbol of our guild? No, let us go, symbol of our guild. Overlord First Half Chapter 2, Prologue Part 2. Momonga exited the room. Originally, when the guild members enter the game, they would appear at this round table. So waiting here for someone would be the best idea. However, the reason for leaving this room was as the possibility of another person coming, as he had said to Hirohiro, was low. He knew this. He would not be coming back here a second time. He began walking. Following his footsteps, the strike of the staff against the floor rang out. Momonga turned to pass several corners and saw a woman walking towards him. Her long rich blonde hair flowed down her shoulders, her face was extremely beautiful. 170 centimeters tall. The black and white parts contrasted with each other greatly on the snow-white maid clothes. A pair of heels were struggling to push themselves out. On the maid uniform, the apron was large and the skirt was long. The combination of the two gave the maid an impression of a refined lady. As their distances narrowed, the woman faced him and greeted him with a deep bow. He raised his hand lightly in reply and stopped walking. He gazed at the maid's uniforms. It was made with extremely fine detail. The apron had fine embroidery sewn onto it. It was at a level of detail such that you could tell that the creator knew what he was doing. Even when she slowly raised her head, Momonga kept silent and gazed at her. Even with the impolite gaze, the woman's expression did not change. It was the same as earlier, a warm smile. The maid was an NPC, non-player character. Characters that moved according to their programming. No matter how detailed the original programming was, expecting them to respond was a fool's errand. However, there was a reason why he could not just act casually around them. There were 36 maids in this castle, each made by a different illustrator from scratch. One illustrator currently had a series in a monthly serialized manga magazine, and at the time had eaten the other illustrators for not being up to standard. The person who wrote the movement AI program was Hiro. The illustrator who drew them was a man that said maid clothes are my justice, and made the details extremely minute, causing the person in charge of the outer appearance to scream. Basically, the maids were made from the cooperation of the guild members. Treating them casually would make him feel bad towards his friends. Thinking about it, the heroine of his series wore maid clothes. While thinking that, the maid tilted her head to one side as if asking if something was wrong. If a certain amount of time passes and someone is nearby, she takes this pose, huh? Momonga searched his memory and praised Hiro's detailed programming. There were other hidden poses. As it had been a while he had wanted to see them all but was pressed for time. Momonga sent a glance to the metal plate that was wound around his wrist, looked at the semi-clear timepiece, and checked the time. There really was no time to relax. Follow. With the maid following behind him, Momonga began walking. With a set of footsteps following behind him, he turned a corner, a set of stairs on which could fit more than 10 people on it appeared. Stepping on the red carpet, he walked downwards towards the floor below. The 9th floor was organized into parlors, reception rooms, the guild members' rooms, and guest rooms. In contrast, the bottommost floor, the 10th floor, was the central part of the guild. It had a library, a treasure room, etc. It was where the important parts were gathered. The bottom of the stairs was a large hall, within contained several shadows. The first one he saw was an old man wearing an orthodox butler outfit. His hair was completely white, his beard as well. However, his posture was firm and resembled that of an iron sword. His Caucasian face had many wrinkles in it, similar to cracks. He also had a gentle look, but had a sharp gaze, much like a hawk searching for its prey. And then behind the butler, there were 6 maids accompanying him. Their weirdness was obvious at a glance. Silver, gold, and black metal greaves on their hands and legs, seemingly easy to move in. They were covered in armor straight out of a manga. Each of them was a different race. They gave off the image of a warrior or guard, and there was a reason why they were maids. The type of armor was unclear, but they had the motif of a maid. Also, in the place of a helmet was a white brim. They were similar to the maid soldiers or maid warriors you could find in manga. Their armaments were also different. Japanese style, Caucasian style, African style, etc. They had varied hairstyles. Chignon, ponytail, sidetail, plaits, side-up, evening party roll. They were quite diverse. They were all extremely beautiful. Well, if beauty encompassed voluptuous, healthy, and Japanese beauties. If he had to say it in one sentence, they were like the entourage of a raid boss. In Yggdrasil, guilds with a base of a castle or larger had a special option available to them. They were the NPCs that guarded the base. For example, guards and knights guarded a castle. These NPCs spawned limitlessly but were only up to level 30. Even if they were defeated, it would be at no cost to the guild. However, they were extremely weak and would get torn up like paper if another guild attacked. In addition, you could not change their appearance or AI. However, you could make NPCs that could actually fight. If a guild had a castle, they had 500 levels to freely spend on NPCs. Since the max level was 100, for example, 3 level 100 characters and 4 level 50 characters could be created. In addition, you could play around with their backstory, appearance, AI, and armaments. Of course, you could also make non-humans. There was a guild that occupied a castle, the Great Cat Kingdom, and they had all their NPCs as cats or as cat-related species. Fumu. Momonga placed his hand on his chin and looked at the butler and maids who had their heads down. He did not come that often and he felt nostalgic. Extending his hand into the air, he clicked a floating icon. Names floated over the heads of the butler and maids. So this was his name, huh? Momonga chuckled. While he was laughing about the fact that he forgot, he also vaguely remembered the time when they were arguing over his name. The butler's role was the land steward of the great underground tomb of Nezarec. The text log should have his role described in extreme detail, but he had no intention to read it all. There was not much time left. By the way, the maids and the other NPCs had a lot of detail in their creation as Einzulgon had a lot of members who enjoyed making detailed settings. In particular, it was thanks to the work of many illustrators and programmers that their outer appearance could be made. Follow. The butler and the maids simultaneously raised their heads and lowered them again, confirming that they had heard their command. Originally the butler and maids were the last line of defense against any intruders. Well, they probably would not be able to fight against the players that make it this far, but at least they could buy some time. Even if that was true, moving them from here was different from what everyone else had intended for them. Einzulgon was a guild that placed heavy emphasis on majority vote. Doing things for one's own convenience was unacceptable. But, there were no players who had managed to reach here, and so they had always waited here. The NPCs feeling sad was a stupid act. Momonga thought so. They had no emotions and were nothing more than data. Even if they had emotions, they would follow that of the AI programming. However, as the guildmaster, he had the authority to move them. While being swallowed in his own thoughts, he began walking. While being followed by several footsteps, they walked a wide path. They arrived in a large room. It was a large room in the shape of a round dome. The ceiling had crystals of 4 different colors emitting white light. There were holes in the walls, inside were statues. The statues all had the shape of a demon and numbered 67. This room had a name on its name tab, Lemageddon. The statues had the motif of Solomon's 72 demons and were golems made of a rare magic metal. The reason why there were not 72 was simple. The creator got fed up halfway through. The 4 colored crystals on the ceiling activated when there were intruders and summon high-ranking elementals of earth, water, fire, and wind. At the same time, monsters would send a barrage of magic attacks. This was the final line of defense. It had the firepower to wipe out 2 level 100 parties. His destination was one room beyond that. Passing through the room, he stood in front of a large door. On the right side of the 3-meter-tall door was a statue of a goddess and on the left was a statue of a demon. As expected, this door did not move, but it seemed probable that a trap had been set up. They won't move, right? Momonga felt a bit worried and touched the door with his hand. Naturally, he did not have a complete understanding of everything in this labyrinth. Someone might have left it as a parting gift before they quit. Mostly because 2 people would do that sort of thing. In the end, there were no traps and the door was opening by itself. However, the massive doors, befitting their size, slowly opened. Beyond it was a wide and tall room. A room that could comfortably fit hundreds. A ceiling so tall you had to stare upwards to see. The throne room. It was the most important place inside the whole of the great underground tomb of Nezarec. It was also the most elaborate of them all. The walls were white with gold worked into them. Several gorgeous chandeliers hang down from the ceiling and were made from gems of 7 different colors. They released a mystifying light. The walls had large banners hanging down from them, reaching the floor. The center of the room was made with lavish amounts of gold and silver. A large banner of Einzulgon was sewn onto a red cloth and was positioned at the top of a flight of stairs. Just before that was a chair cut out of a giant crystal. It was a throne. Momonga walked through the large room. "You can stop here." The footsteps behind him continued. Momonga gave a wry smile. They would not stop moving with the earlier command. Once again, he said an order. This time he did not get it wrong. After all, NPCs are just programs. They could not respond to an order outside of their program. "Stand by." The footsteps stopped. He climbed the stairs in the middle of the room and slowly sat down on the throne. Beneath him, the butler and maid stood at attention. Having them do that in this room made him feel a bit lonely. Such a command existed, Momonga uttered a command he saw once before and while saying so, made a downwards motion with his hand. Prostrate. They immediately dropped down on one knee and took a respectful position. This was good. Momonga raised his left hand and checked the time. 23:55 and 48 seconds. It was the last few moments. Today was the last day of Yggdrasil, the day when all service would stop. About now, the Game Masters would be broadcasting and setting off fireworks. As to why he was isolating himself, Momonga did not understand. Momonga rested his back against the chair and slowly stared at the ceiling. Boasting the position of the strongest dungeon, he thought that there would be some parties to challenge it. He waited. As a guild master awaiting his challengers. Even though he sent a mail to all of the guild members, only a handful came. He was waiting. Waiting to welcome his friends. Relics of the past, huh? Momonga thought. Although his body was tired, being here until now was fun. Moving his eyes, he looked up at the banners hanging from the ceiling. They totaled 41. That's right, it was fun. Excluding the monthly fee of 1,500 yen, Momonga spent more than 50,000 yen on Yggdrasil. He spent 100,000 yen on the lottery in hope of rare items. It was not because he was rich. He simply did not have any simple interests and did not have any other things besides Yggdrasil to spend his money on. Well, as Einzulgon was comprised of members of society, everyone spent money on the game, but Momonga was in a class of his own. They stood at the top of the server. But that was not just it. Going on adventures was fun, but beyond that, playing with his friends was more fun. He had no parents, and mostly no friends. If he had to put it, this guild, Einzulgon, was the crystallization of the golden age he spent with his friends. Gripping the staff, the ending time approached. The time reflected in the corner of the field of vision read 23:57. The server would shut down at 0 o'clock. There was not much time left. The world of fantasy was coming to an end, and the ordinary everyday life would return. Of course, a person could not live in a fantasy. Momonga breathed a sigh. He had to wake up at 4 o'clock tomorrow. He had to go to sleep once the server shut off. 23:59 and 35 seconds, 36, 37. Momonga began counting down. 23:59 and 48 seconds, 49, 50. Momonga closed his eyes. 23:59 and 58 seconds, 59. Counting down the time towards the ending of his fantasy. For the eventual blackout. 0 o'clock, 1, 2, 3. Momonga opened his eyes. He was not back in his familiar room. This was the throne room inside Yggdrasil. What's going on? The time should have been correct. He should have been forcefully logged out by now. He checked the time. 0:01 and 18 seconds. It had definitely passed midnight. In addition, the system clock was definitely not wrong. While being bewildered, no reports were being shown. Earlier, when he closed his eyes, nothing had changed. He was still in the throne room. Has the shutdown been postponed? Possible. Something could have postponed the shutdown. If that had happened, there was a chance that the GM was currently explaining it. Momonga panicked and tried to open a line and stopped. The system commands were not working. What is? It was not just the system commands. The system that gave you an overview was also not appearing. Momonga frantically tried out other functions. Shout, GM call, system forced termination input. None of them had any response. It was like he was completely removed from the system. What is going on? Momonga's bellow echoed in the wide throne room and disappeared. Originally, he did not expect any of the 8 figures to respond. Yes, it was true up till now. Has something happened, Momonga-sama? It was the first time he heard this old man's voice. While Momonga was dumbfounded, he looked towards its source. It was the butler who was raising his head.